Hello, so we are going to talk about some modeling with an AAC device that you might not be familiar with or might be new to you and your student. So we're just going to talk about some tips of how best to go about it when an AAC device isn't as familiar to you. So here's our home board. This is a lot of what the kids at Jordan Valley have. It's a 6C board. And so one really good tip is to stay on the home board when you're modeling with your student or communicating with them. A lot of this vocabulary is stuff that we all use in our everyday life, so it's something you can use in any situation, and you can use it to communicate, to request, to do lots of different communication functions. So, and it is easy and accessible. So, like if they want to request to eat, or if you want to say, "Oh, such a good job," or that looks really bad, or she is walking, right? So you can just use so many different words just on the home board in different situations.
So when I'm learning a new board, I love to just pick a few target words to be familiar with on the board, instead of learning where all the words are. Because for some of our learners, especially if they're learning the board too, we might not use all of these words right away. I try to find a few words that I like, and I'm going to use, I love to use I love to use good, ooh, that's a good one. And I like need. I love stop, because many of our communicators are often telling us that maybe stop or no, they don't like something. So I learn where those are right away. And then some of the other ones I just don't worry about for a minute. And then I'm going to use shorter phrases, because many of my learners that they're learning the board, they might just be using one word phrase, or they're just starting to explore the board. I'm going to match the level of language that they're at, which means I'm going to use one word phrases when I'm communicating with them to model something that they could use. So I'm going to use a phrase that they could then take and they could use. So that might be a one word phrase, like, "It looks like you're telling me that you need it," because then they could take that and use it themselves. If I use a really long phrase, it would be harder for them to imitate that or use it themselves. Or if they're telling me, "Oh, it looks like you're telling me no, I don't want that," or "I want some." So that's some examples of that.
So another tip is to model frequently. It is so important to model as much as you possibly can. When you're learning a new language, right, we like to talk about learning AAC, like learning a new language. And when you're learning a new language, you need words repeated and modeled so many times before you really pick it up. It's the same thing with an AAC device. So I honestly, with some kids that I work with, love to just choose one word and work on it with just that word for 10 to 15 minutes. And I've had some students who are very prompt dependent, so they only will use the board if I point to the word that we're doing first. There's no independent communication. And with one student, after like a 10-15 minute session and modeling one word over and over and over and over again, by the end he was able to find that word on his own independently. So I have a very strong belief that modeling works. So if you just use the home board, and like a book that I read around Halloween is The Woman Who Is Not Afraid of Anything. So you could say not, and you could say, "Oh, look, she was not afraid." And every time you talk about the book or read the book, you just talk about not, and that's the only word you talk about. And that just helps your student really learn the purpose of this word, where it is on the board, and so that they can then use it themselves in any situation.
Another important thing to think about is pausing, which is something that's actually really difficult for me, because I love to talk and not pause. And I also love to provide models on the talker I love to provide a lot of models. But it's important to remember to pause both our verbal words and our visual words. And if we're offering a model, that's,
Good.
ooh, this one's really good. I
Good.
love it. It's so good.
Good.
And then to pause and wait for our learner to process what it is we've provided, because we're offering so much verbal language and we're offering visual language, and that's so much to process both of those things at the same time. We need to provide our learner all that time to process, but then also I always wonder what a learner is doing or saying in their own brain, because sometimes they might be looking and giving them a moment to look. Even if they aren't touching or doing, they're having a moment to look, and that's part of the learning too, is they're provided a moment to look or to think, even if they're not touching. So it's important to pause.
So the last thing we're going to talk about is finding like 1 or 2 pathways for your student of a very high interest item. A lot of our students have very high interest, so the more they're interested about what you're talking about, the more likely they'll interact with the device. So it's great to stay on the home board, right? But it's also, you can find maybe 1 or 2 things. Like a lot of our students love snacks, and a lot of our students love different animals, like sea animals, for instance. So learning where those are. And so if you go up to, in Cough Drop, there's a little picture of your student or a little just image, and it comes up with a list, and it says find a button. So if I want to talk about, like, I don't know, let's see what's the animals we have. A octopus. Do we have that on here? We do. So, and it comes up with the animal. So, and then it highlights the pathway. So it's water animals, octopus.
Octopus.
So that is a way that you can find those really high motivating interests for the students, so that you can talk about like maybe that one thing as well as what's on the home board when you're modeling with them.